Will you pray with me? God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be pleasing in your sight and restorative in ours, for you are our rock, and in the life of Jesus, our Redeemer. Amen. I am acutely aware of what it looks like to be starting my tenure here on Palm Sunday. And the last thing I want to do is set up the comparison between my entrance here and Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem and crucifixion. So mostly what I want to do today is tell the story of this day, because it isn't quite what I remember from being a child. I want to give a little context to the story so we all have what we need to fully enter into our first Holy Week together. So you can see how absurd Jesus really was being on that donkey, and how risky a day it really was. Now, I know that you are mostly familiar with the story of Palm Sunday. The donkey is my favorite touch. It was also the crowd's favorite touch. With Herod over there having his own parade, riding on a big stallion through a different gate on an expensive horse, followed by his soldiers, Jesus, on his colt, was a living version of the old peasant proverb. When the emperor passes, the peasant bows and breaks wind. With Roman soldiers lining the streets, the crowd went nuts at the theatrics. But what they didn't quite understand was this. Jesus was not simply mocking Rome. He was also poking fun at their expectations. His parade with its clown car theatrics was also, in a way, pointed subtly at them because they wanted a savior, a white knight to save them. Which is why, as he approached the city walls, the scriptures say he wept. You see, 29 years before, when Jesus was a toddler, something else had happened on those streets, inside those city walls. He wouldn't have been old enough to participate, but the shadow of what had happened would have hung over him his entire life. And here it gets a bit dark, so bear with me for just a moment. Roughly 160 years before Jesus was born, the Israelites had revolted, and they regained control of Jerusalem for the first time in 500 years. They reinstated Jewish religious practice, which had been illegal, and they founded an independent state. And that lasted for 100 joyful years. Until 100 years later, however, when from a prominent family, a young man rose up named Herod Antipater. He noticed that the royal family could be easily divided, and he set about turning all of the children in the Jewish royal family against each other. He was incredibly successful. By 60 BCE, the family and the throne was divided and unstable. Antipater very helpfully informed Rome of this fact, and Rome ever so generously decided to take control of the situation. So with Rome's backing, Antipater was made governor of Judea 80 years before the story we take up today. Now, that story, with Antipater being installed as the governor, was as fresh for them as the Second World War is for us. Not long ago at all. They could forget the occupation no more than we could forget Pearl Harbor. Now, as I said, 30 years before today's scripture, when Jesus was a toddler, the similarities to our modern era become, in my opinion, even more striking. Antipater's son, another Herod, was the local governor, and it was just before Passover. And Herod, who was known for building great buildings, decided that a flourish on the temple would be nice. So he commissioned a piece, an enormous golden eagle, which was a symbol of imperial rule, and he placed it, spread eagle, above the temple entrance. The people were horrified. And in the dark of night, a group of religious teachers and students went to the temple with their axes and they hacked it off. Herod was furious. And because we have small children here, I'll just say that it was a massacre. Thousands of Jews in town for Passover fought back, and Herod sent an entire army into the temple. The toll is recorded in multiple places as being over 3,000. And when the soldiers were done, Herod, politely I imagine, dusted off his hands and announced primly that Passover was going to be canceled this year. There would be no commemoration of the flight from Egypt, no recollection of the freedom of the slaves. The family of Herod, within 40 years, had risen to power, placed Roman authority over the temple, enacted a massacre on the very night they were celebrating freedom from imperial power. By the time we get to what we are celebrating today, the temple, the whole city, was a tinderbox. And Jesus, well, he was a match. So as he approached it, he wept. I wept, I imagine, he imagined. He wept, I imagine, for the people on the road who greeted him with hosannas, who wanted so badly for Rome to be punished that they were willing to become just like the enemy to defeat it. He wept for the disciples who did not yet understand, and he wept for himself, that he hadn't gotten enough done before this point, hadn't gotten the message across. If even you had only recognized the things that make for peace. If even we had recognized the things that make for peace. If we had recognized that God wanted you to rise up, not armed, but rather to fall down in reverence. Palm Sunday was joyful, exuberant, overwhelming, exciting. Jesus was hamming it up the best he knew how. He was making sure that we knew he was poking fun and singing joyful songs with the people that longed for freedom and for hope. But it was also a challenge. And that is what I hope you take with you today. It is a challenge to look carefully at the world around us and to understand that the white knight God was sending wasn't necessarily Jesus, it was us. And the weapons, they weren't swords like in Herod's army, not troops or soldiers or wars, but love and joy, even, especially when it gets hard. Love and joy. The joy that we experience when we come together like we are today, in the understanding that something different, something better, something more beautiful is possible. So on this Palm Sunday, 1,990 years later, give or take one or two, it's our turn to decide. The parade is about to pass us by, and the same question is presented to us as it was presented all those many years ago. Will you simply laugh at the charade as it passes, not thinking too deeply about what it signifies, and turn away when it gets tough? Or will you also kneel before the one who really does come in the name of the Lord, because he comes in the name of love? And in so doing, sing your hosannas, not simply with your lips, but also with your lives. I hope you will kneel, and I hope you will do so in spirit as you join me in singing our next hymn.